Hello everyone. As promised, we'll take a quick detour to discuss teeth and modeling an open mouth. Like every process when we're dealing with at least some root in anatomy, you want to start with a reference. So this is how the teeth look when they're embedded into the bone. Now remember that there is gums on top of this. There's some fleshy bits on top of that. So a couple techniques. The first one we'll discuss is I just rolled out a thin piece of translucent, not mixed with anything, and you can just cut it into little chiclets, not worrying too much about the root of the tooth or the part of the tooth that would stick down into the bone. And depending on the type of character, the shape and size and regularity is up to you. And then what you can do is you can just shape each one a little bit, just so they don't, again, look too regular, unless for whatever reason your character calls for that. And I'm making these at a much larger scale than we would need for the character we're working on. I just thought it'd be a little easier to see if I made them a little bit larger. And I've also made this a little bit thicker than I need. It can get really awkward if you're trying to sculpt teeth that are really thin. So just use your discretion on that, depending on the scale and the character and how much of the mouth you're going to see. Then I'm going to take this piece of kind of fleshy red color clay. I'm just going to cut it off flat there. And the next thing I'm going to do on the flat part that I cut is just push in a little bit of a trench to hold the teeth. Any tool will work. And then it's just a matter of placing those teeth in an interesting way. Personally, much like dealing with wrinkles and saggy flesh, I would prefer to have a character with a mouthful of teeth that are overlapping and crowded, and maybe one missing, or there's a space that looks like there was maybe could have been one. You can see that from the top, from the front. The other thing we can do carefully is just put in some marks and some variation. So some of those lines, open one too many beer bottles with his teeth, so there's some chipping and some irregularity. Okay, the other thing to remember about making teeth is, as we saw in just bring the skull back in, when you look at it from the top, you can see how they wrap around. So obviously I've just done a small section, but it's important to wrap this in whatever shape the front of the mouth is. Okay, so not straight across. When they're straight across, it can look really goofy. So then if we bake just this, similar to what we did with the eyeballs, we'll end up with something like this. And something I like about the translucent is it does give this this kind of yellowy, not super healthy teeth, like maybe a art teacher that drinks too much coffee kind of look. I know that look well. And so now we've got this cured, and so what we could do, I'll just use this example here, is you could place that into the upper or lower jaw of your piece and obviously sculpt it in. Okay, and much again like the eyeballs, it allows you to sculpt right up to it, and the teeth will hold their shape quite well. Okay, so that's number one. When we get into painting and staining, I'll bring this out again and show you how you could just bring out some of that texture in the translucent. If this is too yellowy, you can mix translucent with a little bit of white. If you don't have translucent, you can mix white with a little bit of yellow just to push them, just to push it off white just a little bit. The next approach is to, again, I'll just use translucent, is to shape teeth, but with a little spike on them, closer to what we would see here, especially on those bottom teeth. So there's a little bit of a spike, and again, you can flatten them out, crush them up. All right, on and on. So what we would end up with then, after baking, is a bunch of hardened teeth. Again, these are much larger than we would use on the project that we're doing. And then what you can do is place these into the soft clay. And you would do this near the end. And again, you can make them as regular or irregular as you want. So I'm just putting them into regular colored Sculpey. You could put in some gums in there. It really depends on how your mouth is shaped. And again, remember that you want to follow that line of the mouth so that there's a curve to it. They're not just straight across. Maybe there's one that got broken off in a community hockey game. There's one that got filed to a point. Okay, so then we would cure that at the very end of the process. Okay, so there's two techniques. Cook the entire teeth and gum set, like almost like I said, a false teeth, and then sculpt that in, or sculpt and cure the individual teeth and place them in the in whatever kind of gum line that you've created. The last technique I want to demonstrate is actually making a mouth interior that you would later sculpt around. If you're working in 3D in CG, working digitally, digital sculpting, this is actually referred to as a mouth bag, which is a pretty great term. That's something that Peter taught me. It's one of my favorite terms that I've ever learned, I think. So I've taken a wooden handle tool, put just one layer of aluminum foil over it, pulled it really tight around the end, rolled out a relatively thin piece of polymer and packed that around it. I'm just going to trim this off so it's somewhat straight. I'll just carefully work that. Out. So now we've got this hollow shape. Really going to be tricky to get the aluminum foil out of here while this is not cured. So what we will do is just shape this, and you really have to have this planned out so you know what you're doing. So I'm just going to compress this a little bit so it's not quite as round. And this is not a surefire method, so you have to be patient, have to be prepared to try it a couple times. Okay, so I've just shaped that a little bit. And now what I'm going to do is cure this, and after it's cured, then we will pull out the carefully pull out the tin foil from the inside, and then we can take that mouth bag and put it in the sculpt and sculpt over it. So here's our hastily assembled mouth bag. I cured it for about 15 minutes, the usual temperature. So I'm just very carefully trying to separate the foil from the inside. And so that becomes the inside of the mouth. And again, you would want to spend some actual time being being careful with what you're doing. Obviously, I wasn't really shaping it whatsoever. But once you pull that shape off of the handle, then shape it into whatever size is going to fit into your piece. Okay, just to keep it, just so I can be straight with you, I am totally winging it here. I've never tried this, what I'm going to do, and I've never seen anyone else actually build a mouth bag out of polymer. And it had never occurred to me until I saw Peter talking about it with ZBrush. So what we could do, and this might have been better to do before it was cured, would be to cut it, and cut it with a bit of a notch so it fits together nicely. Now we have the interior of the mouth, like top and bottom. Just shave this off just for fun. So lightly cured polymer, you can cut it with a knife. Be careful though. So you need to keep the color in mind, but you could do that. You could make some sort of weird tongue. And this is like as sketchy as it gets. However, if you measured this out carefully, you could have a pretty decent mouth interior that you could sculpt, place it into the model, and sculpt around it. Okay, I hope that made some sort of sense. I have a feeling it didn't, but that's okay. There you are, mouth bag in polymer.